Hey class, how you doing? This is Samir Bat and Rocky Bragg with you. Our hot topic is the achievement gap, and we're gonna get right into it. Predictions for an educator: the term achievement gap sounds discouraging.
So, without going any further, what we are going to want you guys to do is pause the video and reflect on these three questions. What do you think the achievement gap is? Who do you think is affected by the achievement gap? And do we have interventions in place for those most affected by the achievement gap? So, let's just take a minute and go ahead and pause the video as you guys discuss this question. And now we're going to move to this video. Hopefully, you guys had a chance to discuss that. I just want to play this quick demonstration.
I would define the achievement gap as an empty stomach. So let's say you and your friend go into a restaurant and your friend has just had a huge hamburger. You haven't had anything all day or all week or for a year, who knows how long. And you're experiencing the achievement gap. We need a lot of hamburgers. I teach at Montbello. There's a lot of preconceptions about the area, and I think that the bottom line is they're just kids, and they have a wide variety of needs, and our primary responsibility is educational needs. In terms of the ELS environments, the kids that I'm working with, it's literacy. The kids need to learn how to read, and a lot of them just don't have that basic foundation in English language skills. So that's kind of the base that you access all knowledge with is literacy, and so that's the need and the base that we're trying to meet that need. We're trying to establish that base. Somebody that's fun to play with. Yeah, those are three great things. Okay, which one's the most important? So write those down and then think about which one's the most important. Okay, he did some. Did you write that all? And that's why it's so important and so exciting to be a teacher working in this high need school, is because you have the capacity to fill that stomach, to fill that gap. These other students, for whatever reason, they had a hamburger and it was great. And you get to find out what these kids need and how you can meet those needs, essentially.
So, just reflecting on that video, there is an evident picture of the fact that the achievement gap is not only systemic, but it's generational. So, unless we have a teacher in the classroom who's willing to really cater their teaching to each student's needs, otherwise, we just keep perpetuating the fact that, okay, well, their parents may not have had that necessary teaching. Okay, well, they pass it on to their son or daughter. Okay, well, they're going to pass that on to their offspring. So it's this domino effect unless there's intervention on part of the educator.
What is the history behind the achievement gap? Reducing the test score gap is probably both necessary and sufficient for substantially reducing racial inequalities in educational attainment and earnings. From the 1970s to now, into the 1980s, some progress was made, but from that point on, the gap stabilized. The situation is basically similar for mathematics and not so very different for science.
So the idea is that the best way to close this achievement gap and this divide between the minorities and the majorities is to somehow also close the margin of test scores. Now, there is statistical data that shows that connection. However, that is not the only thing that should take place in order to reduce the achievement gap. And it's clear, evident by the data that we collected, that the picture has really remained the same from the 1970s into the 1980s and really to now. We're seeing the same groups affected by this achievement gap, and really it's the desensitized nature that teachers have and the educational system has towards these different groups.
Who is affected by the achievement gap? The term achievement gap is often defined as the differences between the test scores of minority and or low-income students and the test scores of their white and Asian peers. Differences between the test scores of students with different backgrounds, ethnic, racial, gender, disability, and income are evident on large-scale standardized tests. Science performance on tests, statewide tests, SATs, etc., access to key opportunities, advanced mathematics, physics, higher education, etc., and attainments, high school diploma, college degree, and employment.
And really, what we're finding is that everybody wants to believe that the achievement gap is just black and brown and it's versus the white counterpart. And that's not necessarily true. Really, there are many more groups, being that we're in 2016 now, that are deeply affected by the achievement gap. It's no longer just black and brown. It's no longer just the stereotypical minority in the classroom. Now it's the disabled. Now it's the LGBTQ community. Now it's foster students. Now it's low income. It's those that have that cultural and social divide between what they were given and what they've been exposed to versus their white or their Asian counterpart in the classroom. And generally, the science that we use to determine the margins in the achievement gap are the SATs, and they are statewide tests. And we've seen previously that there are some cultural and social biases on those. And so, really, we're not sure how fair it is to utilize those as fair assessments in determining what really the achievement gap is. And we're seeing that it's not only in the literacy of English, but it falls in all the other content areas as well. And this leads to the fact that they're not able to reach those higher levels of education and they're not given the same opportunities for jobs.
How are unrepresented populations being reached? Mentoring efforts within communities, intervention programs to reach particular demographics, but students are often grouped with others based on numbers rather than cultural or social need.
And we're definitely finding that more and more schools are implementing mentoring efforts within the communities and within the schools. And it's really to reach those particular students that need that attention and they need that sensitivity in the classroom and they need those resources. And we're definitely finding that district-wide, districts are implementing these intervention programs that cater specifically to those that are low performing because of the fact that they're low income or because of the fact that they are African American or Mexican American and they happen to be first generation, whatever the case may be. It's those cultural and social differences that really make them so separate from their white or Asian counterpart. And the biggest problem, which is what we mentioned last, is that students are often grouped with others based on numbers rather than cultural/social need, meaning that black and brown and LGBTQ and foster and homeless, they generally are just all in one group and they're just seen as low performing. And that's the achievement gap. It's them versus the Asian or white male or female in the classroom. And we are really desensitized to the fact that they need specific attention to each of their groups individually, and we really don't give them that respect. And we just want to share this video on how do we close the academic achievement gap.
So we all know that rising income inequality is hurting working families today. But did you know that So we all know that rising income inequality is hurting working families today. But did you know that it's also putting the next generation of Americans at risk and holding back our economy? That's because all too often, children from Black and Hispanic families lack the valuable resources at home to prepare them for college and to get a good job. Children of color are now the majority of K through 12 students in the US and will play a major role in our future workforce. In order to fix this inequality, we must address the huge academic achievement gaps that exist between children of color and their white peers. Closing them will be a boon for our economy and all Americans. It will be difficult, but we can do it. How? Consider two children. Adam's parents can afford to send him to preschool. His father can take off work when he's sick. Adam also gets to participate in extracurricular activities. His parents can pay for a tutor for homework. And when Adam enters high school, he's prepared for challenging courses. By the time he's college age, Adam is prepared for success. Then there's Maria. Maria didn't go to preschool, and she has to juggle doing her homework and taking care of her siblings while her parents work 2 jobs. She enters high school already behind her peers, and she'll graduate far behind them. She'll be less prepared for college and a good job. So how can we ensure that all kids are able to reach their full academic potential? We need a host of family-friendly policies. These policies will help close the academic achievement gap between children of color and their peers by providing all students with the resources they need to get a higher paying job. This leads to a stronger economy. In fact, if we invest in our students today, our GDP could be $2.3 trillion larger by 2050. Tax revenues would increase an average of $198 billion each year. Investing in our children is a critical step to securing everyone's economic future. We need to act now. Learn more about how we can better prepare tomorrow's workforce at www.
So, just recapping that video, how do we close the achievement gap? You see that the issue moves beyond the educational system and becomes a governmental concept as well. This is something that the country as a whole has to take into consideration, and it's the fact that opportunities and those resources that are given to middle to upper class, typically white or Asian American groups, there needs to be a conscious effort to also give those and provide those for the Black and the brown and the LGBTQ and the foster and the low income. There needs to be a shift in focus as far as where those opportunities and resources are given, because those socially systemic issues are becoming educationally what's the word I'm looking for? Educationally poor issues, and it's really deeply affecting the Black and brown communities in the educational system. Now, moving to connections and conclusions.
Connections and conclusions. We all want change, but our habits are the same as they were in 1980. Very little in the way of individualizing our attention to the groups. In order for progress to be made, curricula needs to be student-centric and sensitive to the needs of each group.
And really, this just follows the whole talk and no walk mentality that our society has, and it's the fact that we all notice, evident from 1970 and the statistics that we have, that the achievement gap is remaining where it is, and we're not putting a dent in it. However, ideologies alone are not going to solve the problem. There has to be action, and it comes from above the educational system. We do very little to actually target specific groups, and instead we group all of them together. Anybody who is underperforming is considered low performing and in a group in and of itself. And it's the fact that we don't actually give and provide the necessary attention and sensitivity to each group is why we are perpetuating this problem generation to generation. An educator's perspective, for me personally, this is just speaking with an educator that I work with. She was my master teacher, actually. She spoke on the fact that underrepresented populations are on the rise, and it's generally falling in these suburban areas that seem like they are middle to high class populations, but there are a number of students who don't fit that mold. So if the curriculum doesn't reflect those students, they fall through the cracks. And typically those students are the black and brown and LGBTQ and the foster and the low income. And instead of individualizing our attention towards them, we are now pushing to teach to the test, which again does not treat them with the sensitivity that they need to be successful. We are pushing them into that box. We are trying to categorize and just force them basically to be successful in bubbling in an answer rather than reaching their full potential. And it's because of that that they're not given a legitimate chance. And on the whole, we are perpetuating the system flaws within education. This is systemic. It's not something that happens at certain schools. It is an issue with the whole educational system. It is really the ignorance of those groups on part of the educators, on part of the boards, on part of the districts, and etc. And there needs to be attention in the way of looking at those marginalized groups and seeing what best supports them individually, not as a group. This concludes our presentation. So we hope that we did a great job or a fair job of defining what the achievement gap is and how we are affected by it.
Thank you guys for giving us the opportunity to give you our perspective.
And have a merry, merry day.